Greetings. In this video presentation, I will be discussing a topic which I'm referring to as the Jesus Christ archetype. An archetype is kind of a primordial pattern in consciousness, some type of role or function or characteristic that we're expressing as we experience life. And of course, Jesus Christ is the character in the Christian religion that many people identify with as their representation of the divine or the divine's connection with humanity, with each of us here experiencing our physical lifetime. There are many different ideas and belief systems and concepts that people have pertaining to who or what Jesus or Jesus Christ is. It's something that's become a very big part of the collective consciousness over the past couple thousand years on this planet. Of course, before the time of that historical era where the Christian religion was developed, there was no consciousness of that particular character in the human consciousness on earth, although the fundamental archetypal qualities or characteristics were represented or conceived of in other ways. There are many traditions where there is some type of character or symbolism pertaining to the divine, to the spirit of the Creator, to the masculine aspect of consciousness, to the sun, both S-O-N and S-U-N, as the solar deity in many traditions represented the Creator, in particular the Creator in its masculine aspect. Therefore, when we start to explore this idea of the Jesus Christ archetype, we can look at other representations of that same archetype that have existed outside of the Christian era. When people look into this topic, some of them are very focused on the historical aspect of a human character associated with the stories of Jesus. And there's many conflicting and competing stories pertaining to the history of that person or persons who may have been woven into that narrative that people read about in the Bible and in other non-canonical spiritual or religious texts. There are stories and information pertaining to this Jesus character found in channeled materials, information relayed from the spirit realm, as well as information relayed to people by extraterrestrial beings, and different historical manuscripts that may be from other religious traditions than the mainstream Christian religion. The early period of Christianity before the Catholic Church developed was greatly influenced by the Gnostic tradition. The Gnostics were those who were focused more on the inner aspect of spirituality, seeking inner knowledge of the divine. The Gnostic term, that's a term that comes from Greece, and in the ancient Greece philosophy, Gnosticism had its roots. So people like Socrates and Plato and the philosophers of that era kind of laid the groundwork for the development of Gnosticism that came about in the beginning of the Christian era. In the early Christian period, there were the Gnostics who saw Jesus or the Christ as more of a symbolic figure, someone who represented humanity's connection with the divine, and our pursuit of inner knowing and our pursuit of self-mastery, of coming into harmony with that divine source. There is also the tradition of using the sun god to represent that similar concept. And there's a theme of Jesus representing the sun symbolically in both the mainstream Christian writings and in other texts that describe this Jesus character. Another influence on the early period of Christianity was the Essenes. The Essenes were a very mystical Jewish sect that existed in that era, and they were focused more on the metaphysical or spiritual aspect of the Jewish faith. They had some major differences relative to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the other prominent veins of Jewish thought in that era. They were also known as the healers. They were the holistic healers of that era, using spiritual healing, using diet and herbs and crystals and those various forms of natural healing that we would see as holistic practices in our present day. There is a branch of the Essenes who were present in Egypt in that time. They were known as the Therapeuti, and our modern word therapist actually originates from the name of that group. Jesus is seen by many as a healer, as someone who performs miraculous healings, who helps us heal not just our body but also our spirit. So the image that anyone may have in their consciousness of this Jesus Christ character can reflect that desire for healing, that seeking of reunion or reconnection with our spiritual source. Many people have mystical experiences where they see or encounter a Jesus Christ character. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're encountering that historical persona that existed in some form a couple of thousand years ago. It could be this archetypal image that exists in their own consciousness, and their own soul or higher self or spiritual guides who work with them are using that image for them to be able to relate to that concept or idea, to that experience of receiving this healing, of having this spiritual light or guidance provided to them. We can't take everything that we perceive in an altered state of consciousness literally, just as our dreams are full of symbolic material. Other types of spiritual visions and experiences can also be based on symbolic or archetypal imagery. To look at what the Jesus Christ archetype can represent, we have to consider that it may not be the same thing for everyone. For one person, it's being used to represent healing. For another person, it could be used to represent forgiveness or salvation. For another person, it can represent a state of union with God or union with the divine. So the Christ character can represent Christ consciousness, which could be understood as a consciousness of being in unity with our spiritual source, in unity with the Creator. This Christ consciousness concept has become relatively popular in the modern era in many of the newer spiritual traditions, newer spiritual writings. And it is, in a sense, a more practical or useful way to understand the Christ character rather than to attach to a human persona, to a character or story that we've been told that may or may not be really that accurate pertaining to an incarnation of someone from approximately 2,000 years ago. We can consider how important or relevant is it for us to be attached to what happened in history at some other time, whether it's 2 years ago, 2,000 years ago, or 2 million years ago. That's another time, another place, and each of us are here living in our present moment. We are here to experience what's happening now and to express, to practice whatever allows us to be the most of who we can be in this current time. We can learn things from history, from things that have occurred in the past, but it's really not the job of someone who lived in some other time to rescue or save us. And if you were to think kind of logically or rationally about what any particular person or incarnation does after they conclude that physical lifetime, it would seem kind of strange or unrealistic for that one persona, that one personality, to be responsible for attending to billions and billions and billions of people who are living on that planet before, during, or after that particular lifetime. But it would make more sense for each individual person to be able to connect with or tap in to that archetypal aspect, that symbolic imagery or representation that those people may associate with the image of a particular historical character. That historical character could be the Jesus character of Christianity, it could be Buddha, it could be Krishna, it could be Osiris, it could be Zeus, it could be any of a number of characters that people have related to throughout history in their particular culture or tradition. The specific history of that character, the particular name or imagery that's associated with it, is not really so relevant in comparison to what the meaning that the person gives or attributes to that character in their consciousness would be. This is why I'm focusing on the idea of the archetype rather than on what may or may not have been historical fact about any persons who were woven in to the particular stories that have been passed along over the last couple thousand years. Those stories are full of various contradictions and conflicts. There's much debate and uncertainty about what is really historically accurate or valid. We find the same challenge even with things that have occurred in more recent times. When we look at history, we see competing stories and viewpoints about things. And since none of us are really present there to directly witness those phenomena, we're really just speculating and placing faith in whatever stories we've been told. We can't truly know what actually happened. And even if we did know what actually happened, what relevance does that have to who we are and what we're experiencing or seeking to create in our lives in the present? People are often fighting and having major disturbances, arguments over things that have happened in a distant time, and failing to really use their critical thinking and their higher consciousness to find healthy solutions to situations that exist in the present. I believe it would be wiser for us to seek out the solutions for what we're approaching or processing in the present, rather than fighting over a story about the past. The past is something that is interesting to explore, to help understand how human belief systems have developed. Yet it's ultimately up to each of us to look at our own belief systems here in the present and to find what is most in alignment with higher truths. Understanding the Jesus Christ character is a potentially useful archetype for us to relate to or identify with can be helpful. It can help us understand how so many different people are having so many different concepts or ideas related to that particular character. For those that are interested in the history that's been explored pertaining to Jesus as a human being, there are many different books and references out there you can find. Many years ago I found it interesting to research the Essene movement, the writings and materials that are presented and carried along or carried forward by the current adherents of that tradition. There's a website, essene.org, ESSENE.org, which shares the viewpoints of the modern Essenes, as well as referring you to the writings, to those ancient texts that they have been holding on to and maintaining since the early part of the Christian era, and even some of them date from before that time. So that gives you some further insight into the early development of that religious tradition, seeing how different groups and different agendas have reposed or repainted things according to their intentions, to their goals or desires. There's, of course, the political influence from the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church that, in a sense, hijacked the early Gnostic form of Christianity. This is something that more people are becoming aware of in modern times, as more of those documents have been made available to the public. There are also many writings from the Gnostic traditions, the Nag Hammadi scriptures, that date to the early Christian era. And of course, you can find many books that present material that people have shared from altered states of consciousness, whether it's through mediums or channels, through Akashic record readings, through past life regressions, where people have had some type of interaction with individuals associated with the historical era that people view as the early part of the Christian era. I hope that this short video presentation has given you some interesting ideas to explore. Spirituality is a very vast topic. There are many aspects of spirituality that we can look at. I found that archetypes are a very vital and important part of our exploration of who we are, of how we relate to the world around us, and how we relate to our spiritual source. Archetypes are something that has a powerful influence on our consciousness, whether we are consciously aware of that or not. Archetypes are used in symbolism all around us. Various mystery schools and secret societies work with archetypes. Depth psychology and Jungian psychology work with archetypes. Even with divination methods like using the tarot cards, people are working with archetypes. And of course, the astrological systems are themselves archetypal systems. Each astrological sign is a form of archetype that relates to a particular aspect or expression of consciousness. I appreciate each of you for taking the time to view this video and to explore these topics, to have a desire to learn and grow, to gain greater awareness about spiritual topics, and to, of course, improve your life in whatever way is important to you. I wish everyone a good day. Namaste.